Okay, so Tawau, welcome. My name is Natalie Kermel. I'm a professor in the Faculty of Native Studies as well as the director of the Rupertsland Center for Métis Research. Welcome thank you for being here, all of you. This is fantastic. Just a reminder that we are being recorded today, so if you don't want to be on the recording, there are forms that are available to let us know what you want. So I think before we start everything at the University of Alberta, we often do the land acknowledgement, and so we need to remember that the University of Alberta is located on Treaty 6 territory, traditional gathering place for Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. And when we have events such as this one, I'd like to remind people what the Rupertsland Center for Métis Research is about. It's a joint venture between the University of Alberta, the Rupertsland Institute Métis of Excellence, Center of Excellence, and the Faculty of Native Studies. And we are housed in the Faculty of Native Studies, and we are an academic research program, and we shouldn't be mixed up with the Rupertsland Institute. We're not the same and not doing the same work. Mainly the academic research that we do is specifically geared towards Métis issues. And the goals and objectives of the research center include building provincial and national connections with the Métis community, increasing research capacity to advance Métis-specific research, and training and employing student researchers. So Métis Talks, I love Métis Talks because, we have two Métis Talks in a year. We have Métis Talks in the fall and Métis Talks in the spring, and I love them both. They have different goals. The fall one is more, I would say, about research that Métis scholars are doing. And then the spring one is really geared towards arts and writers and, people that are providing beauty in our lives on a daily basis. And especially right now, we need a lot of beauty. We need a lot of writers, poets, because the world out there is a bit difficult. So today we are pleased to have two fantastic people, two Métis authors, but also professors here at the University of Alberta, and Marilyn Dumont, who's sitting right here, and Connor Kerr, who has this beautiful cowboy hat, and they'll do their presentation, and afterwards, if you have any questions, we'll turn the microphone towards you, the audience, and then you can ask the questions to Marilyn and Connor. So I'll introduce Marilyn. We'll start with her today. Marilyn Dumont is a poet, a writer, and a professor that teaches in the Faculty of Arts and the Faculty of Native Studies at the University of Alberta, and is proud Métis with different family lines. On her mother's, it's the Vaness and Dufresne families, and on her father's side, it's the Boudreau and the Dumont families. And Marilyn has won many awards for her poetry, In 2019, she received the University of Alberta Distinguished Alumni Award and the Alberta Lieutenant Governor's Distinguished Artist Award. And in 2022, she was awarded the Alberta Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal for public service. So she has many collections of poetry that, like, for example, A Really Good Brown Girl, Green Girl Dreams Mountains, That Tongue Belonging, The Pemmican Eaters, and, of course, the new collections, The South Side of Kinless River, that was published by Bricks Books in 2024. So today, Marilyn will, the presentation of her, the title of her presentation, sorry, is Writing Myself Back into the History of Alberta. So please welcome Marilyn Dumont.
Thanks very much, Natalie. I want to say that Natalie has done an amazing job over at the RCMR. It's a really hard job. It's only supposed to be like a percentage of her work. And we know what happens at the university when you have percentage of your work, right? It starts to balloon and pretty soon you're like the CEO. So yeah, we all know about that. Let me just grab my papers. So thanks, Natalie, for doing such a great job. Yes, I wrote myself back into the history of this province. So I'm going to read a bit of prose and a bit of poetry. And this is from a collection of critical work on my poetry by introduction by Armand Ruffo, and it's published by Wilfrid Laurier Press. When I think of poetry, I first think of the poets who gave me permission to challenge the English language's rules, its authority and dominance over the language registers spoken in my home and judged as deficient. Poets and fiction writers offered me a powerful tool to resist English, to disengage with the authority of such a colonizing force. A few names come to mind: Leslie Marmon Silko, Joy Harjo, Simon Ortiz, Wendy Rose, Rita Joe, Maria Campbell, Daniel David Moses, Jeanette Armstrong, Lee Miracle, and Beatrice Moisener. All trailblazers who made a path for another generation of writers like me. They helped me shift the oppressive power of the grammatical, mechanical, and moral order of English to a code which I could use to vindicate the lives of 5 generations of my family in Alberta, a province which has only practiced land acknowledgement since the 2000s. So I thought what I would do is kind of trace and use kind of a narrative about how I came to find myself. Our Gabriel. In the late 60s, several members of my family dared to speculate we might be related to Gabriel Dumont, Louis Riel's general in the 1885 Riel Rebellion. I was 10 years old, and it was the first time I'd heard of such an historical figure. My father showed only mild interest in the portrait of Gabriel on the thin paperback that my eldest brother held in front of him. Gabriel Dumont, Indian Fighter, by Sandra Lynn McKee. It was a type of popular history book sold in gas stations and little gift shops along the Trans-Canada Highway, displayed with other provocative titles like Murder on the Plains or The Lost Lemon Mine. I remember thinking it highly unlikely that we could have descended from a figure important enough to have a book written about him. There seemed to be nothing remarkable about our family lineage. We were a large, poor Métis family living in small-town Alberta, having migrated from the north-central part of the province so my father could find work. I assumed if we were related, it was so distant all we could share was a last name. My family had just relocated to Golden, British Columbia, lured there by better wages in the booming logging industry, an industry which he and my mother had eked out an existence for nearly 20 years in Sundre, Alberta. My father logged lodgepole pine, and my mother was a camp cook. It was a no-frills life, supporting 9 children on a faller's and camp cook's wages. Our house in Sundre was an old one-room schoolhouse. My parents worked away from home in a logging camp during the week, while my older brother and sister cared for another brother and me. My father hunted moose and deer to keep meat on our table. Friday evenings, my parents came home via the grocery store with other essentials like fruits and vegetables. My mother supplanted any store-bought bread with large slabs of bannock. Our home was frequently a halfway house for men from the Kikino Métis settlement who sought work in the bush with my dad. My parents had moved off the settlement in the early 1940s, not long after the Alberta Métis Population Betterment Act established a land base for the destitute Métis population. Many Métis lived on road allowance and survived on what they could hunt or trap. Even though moving from the settlement meant leaving relatives and a Cree-speaking community, relocation to a small, non-native rural community held more promise, with a school, public services, and hope of gainful employment. Today, most, if not all, Métis settlements boast schools and local businesses. In Golden, we rented a tiny 2-bedroom trailer with an extra room built onto the side. The space accommodated my parents, my 2 older brothers, and me, the youngest of 9 children. When my brothers and sisters and their families arrived to this tiny trailer, it burgeoned with bodies. One of the brothers who visited from Alberta had married a woman who was interested in Canadian history and the Riel resistance period. I'm not sure if we knew at the time where her interest originated, or even if she knew. But years later, when her genealogical research revealed that she was descended from Major General Middleton, who commanded the Canadian troops against Riel, the irony was not lost on us. Throughout those years, we began to collect books on Gabriel Dumont, Louis Riel, Métis history, and the rebellion. Apparently, the publishing world knew others were interested in this history too, particularly in Dumont. In 1975, Hertig Publishers released Gabriel Dumont by George Woodcock, which ignited the imagination of Canadians about Dumont, whose influence in the Métis rebellions had previously been overshadowed by the controversial Louis Riel. I recall studying these books and scrutinizing the photographs of Dumont as if the keys to unlocking our family history were somewhere in the sepia. Sandra Lynn McKee's photograph or biography of Dumont, the thin newsprint paperback, bore a black and white photograph of Dumont on the cover that slightly horrified me. His balding head and rugged face, ratty beard and buffalo hair-lined vest so dominated his chest, it appeared he had a bald crown but unusually long and bushy braids flowing down his barrel chest. His eyes were intense and disarming. I saw no resemblance between him and my father. However, in another black and white photograph of Gabriel posing in a suit, I did see a resemblance. Their facial features had a striking similarity: a square face, defined broad nose, wide, flattened bottom lip. As I examined the full body shots of the broad-shouldered stout Dumont, I saw an uncanny likeness between him and my father. I don't think my father or any of us knew how much family pride would stem from recovering the knowledge of our lineage. But I do remember my father's posture straightening and his face lighting up as more of his children showed interest in our connection to Gabriel Dumont. At the time, and the time for recovering this family history was ripe. It was the late 1960s, the era of protests against the Vietnam War, of women's and civil rights marches, the publication of Maria Campbell's memoir, Half-Breed, the standoff at Wounded Knee, and Canadian Aboriginal leaders Harold Cardinal and Stan Daniels capturing media attention. The opportunity for recovering our Aboriginal ancestry could not have been better. Perhaps it was a relief to my father to believe that he came from such noble beginnings, despite his own father's loss of a homestead situated on land that lacked sufficient water to support a farm. I'm sure he was bemused by his children's sudden interest, even more puzzled by the capricious nature of public opinion about Aboriginal culture and history. With these changing times, our history could be reclaimed, and my father's past wasn't merely the story of poor, struggling half-breeds, but of a proud descendant of Gabriel Dumont, Riel's general. As my family collected more books on Métis history, one of my older brothers researched the Dumont crest and proudly showed us to the rest of us. We joined provincial Métis organizations, became of Métis events such as Back to Batoche in Saskatchewan. My mother bought a subscription to New Breed magazine. My nieces and nephews, when studying Canadian history in their classrooms, were acknowledged because of their link with the Dumont name. One of my nieces was named Gabrielle. Just saying our name in public summoned pride in us. I don't know if there was a pivotal moment for me as much as a lengthy process of historical inquiry and gradual acceptance. We had no genealogical record, and I admit that without it, I doubted our ancestry for years. Then the genealogical record came to me. I was an undergrad at the U of A. When the late Dr. John Foster, a history professor, offered me a copy of 6 church ledger-sized pages that trace the Dumont genealogy back to Jean and his 3 sons, Gabriel, Isidore, and Jean. Isidore fathered the famous Gabriel. Our family descended from Gabriel Sr., who lived in the Edmonton area and was captain of the hunt at Lac St. Anne. Upon discovery that our Gabriel Dumont Sr., our great-great-grandfather, and the uncle of the famous Gabriel, had held the position of leader at Lac St. Anne, I finally understood why our family's annual summer visit to the pilgrimage was so important. In 1842, Gabriel Sr. guided the Oblate missionaries and Abe Thibault to Lac St. Anne, when it was established as a mission and a Métis settlement. And it was Abe Thibault who sanctified the marriage de pays of the elder Gabriel Dumont. So that's how I came to find out and accept that we were related to Gabriel through his uncle, who he's named after. And I think one of the things that I also have learned through this whole process is that Alberta was a very robust and lively Métis community all along. We don't have to look to Manitoba for a history. We have a long history here. And the Jean Dumont, who arrived here in 1795, did not leave Alberta. So when people think of the Métis, they think, oh, Manitoba, oh, Saskatchewan. Well, it's now, oh, Alberta, right? And I've learned a lot about that. Something else I learned, you learn a lot from reading history books. Some things you don't want to know. So while researching the poetry collection, The Pemmican Eaters, I came upon a passage about John Rowan, Czar of the Prairies, written by James Grierson McGregor, which stated that Francois Dufresne was the illegitimate son of Chief Factor Rowan and Marguerite Mondillon, a Mohawk woman who later raised Francois with Edouard Dufresne, a Frenchman, in Fort Pitt. I reread the passage with skepticism, thinking this was not the same Francois Dufresne as my great-grandfather on my maternal side. However, another piece of information in the text indicating that Dufresne had been held hostage at Frog Lake during the resistance shifted my skepticism to astonishment. Was this true? Why didn't my mother ever mention this? My mother had passed, and I could not ask her about our historical accounts. which presented the same information. And slowly I came to accept this surprising piece of information about my family. But it stopped me in my tracks. I stopped writing for about 6 months. I couldn't write. I thought, how am I going to write this now? I started writing out, you damn settlers. And now it's like, you damn Métis connected to the settlers. It had taken my family over 40 years to accept and honor our connection to Gabriel Dumont through his uncle, Gabriel Sr., whom he was named after. I recall looking at historical photographs of Fort Pitt treaty signing many times, and recall my mother telling me that Edward and Henry Dufresne were in the grainy pictures, and that some of the Dufresnes lived at the Fishing Lake Métis settlement, with other Dufresnes were members of the Onion Lake First Nation. The Dufresnes in Fort Pitt, in the Fort Pitt treaty signing photographs, are small men and appeared to be more European, unlike the stocky Dumont on my paternal side. As the new information about my mother's family and the absence of any mention of it by her began to sink in, I recognized that her reaction was similar to my father's reaction to learning about our relative Gabriel Dumont Sr. in Alberta. I couldn't determine if their seemingly indifferent or muted responses was due to humility, shame, or just not having memories of it. My mother was the eldest daughter of 5 children of Danielle and Anna Vanessa, who lived in Onion Lake First Nations, which straddles the Alberta-Saskatchewan provincial border. As the eldest daughter, my mother, Mary Vanessa, was given responsibility beyond her years because her mother was chronically ill. And her father was an interpreter for the Department of Indian Affairs. Because of this upbringing, my mother could speak what was called High Cree, often Cree spoken in ceremony or prayer. And it's like an old, I guess it's like an old-fashioned Cree, where you pronounce all the words. She learned this by being around my grandfather, Danielle Vanessa, who had taken over the role of interpreter from Francois Dufresne, my mother's grandfather, and my great-grandfather, Ochapa. One of the only family photos of Dufresne I've ever seen is an image of 4 elders standing in front of a small sod hut. Chapan, Francois Dufresne, Nokum, Anna Dufresne, Japan, Catherine Dufresne, and an unidentified female relative by the last name Cardinal. Francois is slightly stooped, but still elegantly towers over the woman in the photograph. He is lean and has a pale complexion, much paler and taller than Catherine Dufresne. My mother shared little with her children about her growing up, other than her family was provided with rations during the Depression. I recall her listing off the coveted foods, such as bacon and coffee, while my father's family survived on staples they could buy and harvest the rest. Unlike my father's family, who are itinerant and used to harvesting and dressing wild meat, my mother's family ate meat and eggs from the department farm. This is not to paint my mother as gentrified, because if she ever was the daughter of an Indian Affairs interpreter, she soon excelled at harvesting wild meat when she married my father. Mary, my mother, attended day school on the Onion Lake First Nation until she was finished grade 6, which ascribed her the eternal role of secretary to my dad, who attended grade 3 near Camrose. My mother casually mentioned once that Dufresne wrote poetry. The fact that he wrote poetry told me something about him, that he may have been better educated compared to most of the people at the time. He did have a plum job as an interpreter at Onion Lake, and I thought, not everyone gets a job as an interpreter, not with Indian Affairs. As I write this, oh, no, I'm gonna stop there. So that's how I found out about my mother's side. So I'm just gonna read you a couple poems now, because I'm probably way past my time. I'm okay? Yeah, because So essentially, I did the research and history of writing myself back into this province. However, the education system doesn't follow my line of reasoning or my narrative at all. And I'm glad I'm in the Faculty of Education, because now I'm teaching a course in Métis Lit, and my students who come into that class better be teaching Métis Lit to their students. Because I'm tired of being dismissed. I'm tired of being ignored. I'm tired of not being acknowledged. I don't want any land. I just want people to respect the fact that I'm Métis and say it. And say it along with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. I am Indigenous. The Métis are Indigenous. I'll just read you a couple poems. So yeah, I spent time reading a lot of books, and I didn't go to the archives. It was mostly secondary research I did. But this is called All My Archival Relations. All my archival relations' faces are disquieting, solemn, and infinitely lonely. Prisoners of alphabetical order and silence. Calmut-smoking, Cree-speaking half-breeds elude lost kin. The country way only identified half-breeds and Indian women. Nomenclature was in short supply, apparently, and life measured in ways that never amounted to much. A cold life captive in an archive is hard to light. The heartwood dead. I imagine my chapan, Francois Dufresne Jr., hostage at Frog Lake, born in a time when cowboys were Indian or Black. Biological son of Chief Factor Owen and Marguerite Mondion, Iroquois country wife, raised as the son of a Frenchman, Edouard Dufresne, in Fort Pitt. I come from a family of interpreters and ventriloquists, our eyes tattooed kinscapes over the light tables and microfiche, stumbling along half-lit paths to ourselves. A name, a date, a face, a few facts might lead to a life, but lives like facts are forgotten. A family tree reduced to fallen timber, erasing visible tracks back to ourselves. Wind-blown faces petition me, stories I would follow anywhere. So perhaps there is life among the sepia photographs, moth-eaten sashes, and a few facts are maps back. I want to read this one about my Timothée. Timothée Dumont lived at St. Paul de Métis. The ground spoke of you, Timothée. Rock face, cut bank, coulee cliff, drop, transfer rift, rain. Born on the eclipse of the Rupert's Land transfer, shifting continental rains, for a blind half-breed craving land, on the poker table of governance, between church and state. Betrayal leashes out the church walls of St. Paul de Métis, runs down the wall stained in deceit like piss. The half-breed's church bait for those obsessed with holiness and ascension, and turning perfectly good half-breeds into munyawak, until we burn the school down and become gravel in Father Terrian's shoe. So when the ground spoke and startled geese shot up from the lake, the ground stopped listening. There's some incredible women that I write about in this latest book, South Side of a Kinless River. And I'm going to read some from Victoria Belcourt Callahoo, who was a force. She was, there's a story about her jigging on her 100th birthday. And out at Lac St. Anne, she was an entrepreneur. She had a hotel, she had a pool hall, and she had a player piano. But first, I'll read the poem about Victoria's jig. Victoria Calahoo enters a jigging contest on her 100th birthday, lining up with girls in stiff crinolines and women with child-rearing legs. She, in high-topped moccasins, patch dress, and hide-skinning muscle, take to the dance floor. The attention of onlookers converging on her tiny gray frame alone at the center. Her toes at attention, waiting to spring. To the fiddler's bow swept along, strumming guitar, stitching her feet to the strings, bending the hem of her dress, bouncing. Audience gasping at her feet, exacting swift step changes. Weightless and nimble, she skim shuffles in the fiddler's trance. Her young face shining through her smile, bouncing off the surprised faces of the child-rearing women, the deflated crinolines of girls leaning in disappointment as Victoria takes first place. And I'll just finish this one. And she also spoke Cree into the telephone when she first had it to see if it really worked. It's called The Wire. At 101, Victoria Belcourt Calahoo tested her Cree on Biwapskos. Kine hiawanchi, her pronunciation echo-circling, small winging her words, barn sparrows and wasps, syllables whistling, a musquachi waskaigan, witaskawin, musquachi, through the thin black lines back to Victoria's ear, and a plump smile confirming that the white man's black stick, the long black line, Biwapskos, works. Thanks for listening.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Marilyn. It's always a pleasure to listen to your voice and the stories of your family and the poems, of course. So maybe there's some questions for Marilyn, like especially when it comes to the writing process. So we have a microphone.
Okay. I'm just wondering, Marilyn, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I learned actually quite a bit. What advice do you have for young ones coming up, like next generations that, former generations have been shamed or not kind of transparent about their identity?
Yeah.
And what would you have to say to them, particularly young women?
I would say learn about the women, the Métis women, who are rarely written about, but they were a force. And if you read any of that history, you'll realize that the women were really instrumental in the Buffalo Brigades as well. And you look at Brenda McDougall's work, she basically has been working on us for many, many years, and found out that the Métis women were the ones who decided who married whom to keep the Buffalo Brigade strong. Imagine what kind of power that would be, to decide who your relatives will be, right? And so they had a tremendous amount of power. Not only that, they were just, like my mother was the center of our house, and she ruled it. And she controlled it. Nobody disrespected Mary, certainly not in her house. And we had lots of people coming through our house, lots of men that my dad had hired, relatives from Lac La Biche, because he subcontracted with a logger in Sundre. And so what my dad did then is he hired all his relatives to come down and work in the camp with him. Yeah, I think I would tell them to read about our history. I would tell them to talk with the women of the Métis Nation that come to our events. I would say talk to them. Hang around the women and learn who you are and learn how important you are now and have been in history.
Hello, Professor Dumont. How are you?
Hello.
I'll have to check out some of your books later, but I wanted to potentially ask, how accessible was the conventional world of publication to you as a Métis woman in person?
Well, I started writing and publishing at a time when Canada was just opening up its eyes. And so for me, the publication was easy, the first one. Ever after that, I had trouble publishing. Sent to different publishers. I even sent back to Brick Books. Don't want it. So yeah, so I wouldn't say it was difficult. As I say, it was just blossoming, and people were wanting to hear from Indigenous writers. But that took a long time to come, because when I was publishing, like, there weren't that many Indigenous writers, and we had there was no agents. Agents? What the hell is an agent? We never had an agent. It's like, and there was one person in this country who was an agent, and she would never look at an Indigenous person. So guess who I'm not going with ever? So now there is more interest, and I think there's a lot more interest now in BIPOC, Indigenous, LGBTQ, Two-Spirit writing than Canadian Lit. That answer your question?
And can I just add maybe one more?
Absolutely.
What would you suggest to young Indigenous writers and also just young Canadian writers in order maybe to build their skills and/or kind of portfolio of work?
Yeah, I would say read. If you want to write poetry, read poetry. You don't know how many people I've spoken to who said they want to write poetry, and then I ask them what they read. Oh, I don't read poetry. Are you kidding me? It's like saying a skier never skis, or that a guitar player never picks up his guitar. It's like, what? And so I would say read poetry, read what you want to write, take creative writing classes, gather with other writers and workshop your work. Just become familiar with some of the magazines that publish literary work. And it's the same process of looking for a job when you're a teenager. It's one notch at a time. It's like, oh, I published there, great. I published 2 poems, great. I published 4 poems. So you just keep doing that, and then soon you will have a list, and you can take that to a publisher and say, these poems are published in these books. Would you be interested in looking at a full manuscript? That's really one way to do it.
Hi. So I was wondering if you had any advice for younger Indigenous folks who, like Métis or First Nations even, who grew up in like more modern times, and they, like me, kind of lost track of being able to keep up with the past culture. Like, it feels like we're too busy keeping up with life as it is to look back and like do what you were able to do and read about Gabriel and kind of find that connection. How do younger folks find that connection with their cultures in their individual nations or culture around which they live?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I know it's one it's a very important question, because many of us got lost in the whole process of settler colonialism. And I think it's just important to come and hang out with Métis people. If you're Métis and you've been dislocated from that, come to our events, meet people, and believe me, you'll find relatives. All you have to do is start listing your names, and you'll find relatives there. So,
I'm from Lac-Michigan.
oh, there you go. What's your last name?
Quintel.
Oh, yes, okay. Yes, you'll find people. You will find people that are connected to you. So I would just say hang out with Indigenous people, go to Métis events, get connected there.
I wanted to thank you for sharing your stories. It's so important right now. The only link that we have to our past is through people like you sharing stories. And largely, the information that you're referring to, the actual research has been kind of limited to academics. And, you know, that history, it has been an oral history. And I think it's so important to go back and look at the facts. And you going back and finding the documents and then building your stories, your poems based on that history, so important. So how would you direct the youth in the room that want to get in and tell the stories and share our culture? Where would you point them to find that history?
Well, actually, the history books that I read are all in the library. Anybody can get them out. It's just that people aren't interested in reading them. They're not really interested in the history. So, but I didn't go to an archive. I didn't go to primary research. I was all secondary research. And those books are all available to anyone who wants to go and get them in the library. There's so much being published now on the Métis, which is wonderful, and you can't keep up to it. But yeah, all of those books can be found.
If there was one resource that you could share that's like a must read, what would it be?
1.5 Men by Murray Dobbin.
Yeah.
My brother said, every Métis should be slapped on the side of the head with that book. Because it teaches you about where the Métis Nation of Alberta came from, how long it took, what kind of sacrifices those people made. They hitchhiked to try to get people to join the Métis Nation. They slept under bridges. They didn't have expense accounts. That's how the Métis Nation grew from the grassroots. And people can read about it. The book, 1.5 Men, is out of print, but it can be accessed through the Gabriel Dumont Institute as an ebook. My brother tried to buy a copy of it, and it's very expensive because I say it's out of print, but I think it can still be borrowed from the library. I know the library downtown has one, but it's in that collection where you can't take things out. What's that called? What, special collections? Yeah, what a name, special collections. So, yeah, so no, it's not as if these books are set aside and people can't get to them. People can get to them. It's that people don't read nowadays. People would rather pull out a screen or look at the television. I know what that's like too, but basically we have to read again. Yeah.
So we'll take another question. Keisha? Yeah.
As always, I love hearing your stories and what you share. And I think this sort of touches on a few things that people have brought up, because I think I love how you bring in the archival stories, even if you mostly work on secondary sources. But I also think there's always a tension here, because you express that you didn't believe really until you saw it in writing. And that's not our way of telling our stories. At the same time, I think we feel the need, and especially maybe more than ever, to somehow prove who we are with written documents.
Absolutely.
So I just would invite you to reflect a little bit on that tension between, it is often a way home for many of us to see those genealogies, but how can we also reclaim the power of our story? And
absolutely. Yeah, that I don't know. Maybe you can answer it. Maybe you could answer it, Keisha. I don't know. I wish I was born in this time, because I was born in the 50s, and it was like, who the shit gave a care about the Métis? Nobody. We didn't even exist here. Not until maybe the 70s, 80s. Yeah. So. Yeah. Anyways, thanks. I'm taking too much time.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your questions. And thank you, Marilyn, again, for sharing your stories. I have a copy of the book by Murray Dobbin, and it's falling apart.
Yeah.
Because I use it so often. So and also like I make sure that my students have the opportunity to read part of the book as well.